NZXT Cam. Monitor your games while playing. To learn more about it, check out the description. Hey everyone, it is the Angry Honey Badger here, and it's time to take a look at Badgers picks for the week of May 3rd. We're going to see who's free this week and which 4 of those champions I'm going to recommend that you play. Free this week, there will be Annie, Bard, Braum, Evelyn, Fizz, Lee Sin, Misfortune, Swain, Trundle, and Twitch. And for my first champion recommendation this week, I'm going to give that one over to Misfortune. Misfortune, I think, is a little bit undervalued. She did just get a slight buff. That's kind of a nice thing, although there were some nerfs before that. But regardless, the one thing I think most people underestimate, and I've talked about it a few times, that she does a lot of damage with her ultimate. And I really think it can be a very effective tool against heavy tank teams. I know typically that wouldn't make much sense, but if she does get a Lord Dominic's, then she can just shred through entire enemy teams. The one I mentioned, or at least last time I think I recommended her, was I was a full tank Zac with like Omen, Thornmail, and a bunch of other armor. I had like basically 300 armor, and she did like 2,700 damage to me with a full ultimate. I underestimated how much that was actually going to shred through me, and I took, pretty much the whole thing bouncing around as Zac. But oh my god, like, she can just absolutely destroy with her ultimate still. She can also trade very, very well in the lane if you are good with her Q, which is another fun aspect to try. I know some ADCs are easier to trade in lane with others than some. I think she's not super difficult, but if you get really good with your Q, you can land a lot of impactful damage early when they only have 1 health pot. And it's a lot difficult. It makes it a lot difficult for them to like stick around in lane and continue to CS safely. So I think she's pretty good, honestly. And her strat passive and all that fun stuff that's involved to get back to lane quick is always a good way to not miss out on experience in CS too. So overall, she's just fun and still pretty damn good. So try her out this week. My second recommendation for this week is going to go over to Trundle. Trundle is still quite strong, well, almost anywhere, in the jungle, in the top lane, as a support, which is a little weird for some if you still haven't tried it out, although that's not that new anymore. But it's still really fun, to be honest, because of this pillar and how it works down there, especially since people use the bushes, and it's really, really easy to pillar them to a position where they basically get stuck between the wall and the pillar, or they just get bopped back and then have to go around it, and you get all that slow field around the pillar as well. So like, pillar's super impactful in bot lane. It works really well, but it's impactful anywhere. But for the big thing, with tanks still roaming around in this meta, Trundle's ultimate is fantastic for just cutting through tank stats. I played a game with him the other day against a Maokai top lane. I didn't even try to pick the counter. They just kind of picked into it, which is fine. But Trundle does so much great work when Maokai jumps into the middle of a fight, and all you do is you just ult Maokai, and if Maokai overextends the start of that fight barely, your team can shred through him because you just rip his stats off completely, and he's not the tank or the super tank that he's supposed to be in that fight. So he can completely shut off like a whole front tank engaged team pretty effectively, and he has a very strong passive for laning too, so you can always, whether or not you like have the best laning matchup, you can always get health back to you if you're having a little bit of a rough time. So try out Trundle if you don't play him much. I know a lot of people really don't play him, so you should be trying him out this week if you don't have him. My third recommendation for this week is going to go over to Bard. I think Bard's still incredibly fun to play. Not probably the absolute strongest support, but I think in the right hands, he can become an incredibly impactful support, and I've talked about this before too. It's all about the player behind Bard. You can see fantastically amazing Bards that make his kit seem incredibly unfair. You can also see Bards that just do almost nothing, and just, you feel like, wow, what a worthless champion. But that's kind of a good thing I see in a champion. Like, I like that in some champions when they have really high scaling limits, and then when people don't execute that, it just looks like they're not really, like, what's the point, or like, what can you do, like, what are you going for? So Bard is that champion. So if you are a support player who hasn't picked him up yet, I would be slightly surprised. But if you are that kind of player, or just want to try out support a little bit, if you get stuck with it for some friends, or when you're playing with some friends and you need to fill a role and you're not used to it, you might want to try him out. He is pretty fun. He also is really fun too if you're a support who likes to harass with auto attacks, which you should be doing with any support that is ranged. But he does it really well too, and it's actually more impactful because of his passive too. So Bard, super fun to play. You should also try him out this week if you're looking for someone to play. And my final recommendation for this week is going to go over to Lee Sin. Now, Lee Sin, I know, has gotten a little bit of harassment because I've had him further up in the tier list for a while. And a few people have been complaining, well, he doesn't scale into late game. The tier list isn't about who scales into late game. That's not what a tier list is. Lee Sin has some of the most amazing, impactful performances in the first 20 minutes of game any jungler can have. And that makes him a very strong champion. His scaling into late game is unfortunate. I don't actually think it's as terrible as some people think it is. If you do go full Lee Sin, full solo queue attack damage Lee Sin, your scaling only falls off in the effects of you just aren't tanky. But you can still kill anyone with effectively a Q combo and a kick. That's all it takes to completely annihilate out a squishy mage, a squishy jungler, or any ADC. So, in scaling purposes, his Q is outrageous. It does like over 1,000 damage if you kick someone. And you can kick them to a whole team. You can do like 5,000 damage with a damn kick if you build them full AD. The other thing to mention too is, if you are playing more of a team-oriented Lee Sin and you want to be good and get in and set up fights into the late game, then your Lee Sin should still have Warrior early and maybe one like pseudo damage item, but you should be focusing over into more of a tank build. And in that aspect, for what he's used for in team fights, is still fine. He still does things incredibly well. Granted, yes, the scaling on tank Lee Sin isn't super epic, but it's not there to be a super tank or to be super damage. It's there to get in, protect people. It's there to kick people to the right locations when you want to get in and start a fight. It's good for peeling if you wanted to use it for that instead of even setting up a fight. So I think people say it's weaker because they're not good at Lee Sin, but it takes a long time to learn Lee Sin to a very mechanically awesome spot, and that's why a lot of LCS players still find him incredibly useful in certain games, because their mechanics carry him up to the greatness that he actually can have. So try him out this week. Give him some time if you don't play him obviously regularly, because it might feel a little weird since everything he does is a little weird. Not super weird, but you know, it's impactful to land your Qs and to kick people in the right directions and to cripple the right people at the right times and not run out of energy, and make sure you auto attack in between them and safeguard to the right, people to keep them alive. So he's complicated, is what I'm saying a little bit, to play him at the highest level. But try him this week because he's free. Those are the 4 champions that I'm going to recommend that you try out this week. There obviously are 10 of them to play this week, so you should play any of the ones that you want to play. I will now go over all of them, of the ones at least I didn't talk about and why I didn't recommend them, or if I have any tidbits to say about them. I actually really like Annie. She does plenty of damage. She's pretty straightforward. If you're really bad at CSing too, she's amazing at it because her Q refunds all the mana if it kills the minion, so you can just Q farm constantly. Super easy. Braum's still one of the strongest supports in the game, actually. Just didn't feel like recommending him, but he's obviously great. Evelyn's always been falling up and down in power, but recently she's just been pretty irrelevant, so I'd avoid her for the most part. Fizz is fine. He's in a pretty good spot at the moment. Not the strongest, but definitely not weak. He can pretty much snowball like any of the mid lane mages if they want to. I just personally don't play a lot of Fizz because I think he's a little boring to play. Then there's Swain, who is in need of the mage rework. I would avoid him for the most part. And Twitch honestly isn't terrible right now, but I think there's better ADCs you can definitely be playing, and or more fun ADCs. Once again, I find Twitch kind of boring. Not that he's like terrible by any means. I just personally don't like to play him. So, but play any of the champions you want to play, and let me know who you are going to be playing down below in the comments. Always like to know who you guys are playing. So I can maybe make videos towards that champion if there's an overwhelming amount of people who are like, yeah, I'm going to play your mom. Got him. Anyways, that is going to be free week for this week. I hope you guys have a great time this week playing games, and best of luck on the fields of justice.